Welcome back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast where business and humanity meet. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today in this episode, we are delving deep into a topic that's more relevant than ever: leadership perspective on creating inclusive spaces for dialogue. Now, if you know me, you know I believe the strongest businesses are built on not just on strategies or numbers, but on stories, connection, and community. Creating spaces where people feel heard and valued is the pulse of modern leadership. And joining me today is someone who lives and breathes this mission. Listeners, meet Mathias Lemos Castillo. Mathias is a seasoned DEI consultant, founder of MLC Consulting, and board chair of the Latino Professionals Association of Greater Madison. His work spans from grassroots community building to strategic DEI transformations at the national level. And his story from Uruguay to the US, it adds a deeply personal layer to his leadership philosophy. So, listeners, whether you are leading a team, running a business, or just trying to show up better in your own space, this conversation is definitely for you. So, with that, Matthias, welcome to the show, and it's such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Sana, so much for having me and to the listeners for taking the time. I'm really excited to be joining you this morning and definitely an important topic to be discussing today.
Lovely, lovely. So, in the intro, I mentioned that business or uh, you know, a company is not only about numbers or strategies, but it's about stories, human connection, people, and the community there. So, before we dive deep into the topic, would you like to share a bit about your personal journey, Matthias, with all of us?
Definitely. Where do I start? I've been doing consulting for, I want to say a number of years, but officially 3 years. I started in 2022. Before that, it was just, you get brought into projects, have
Mhm.
fun with people, and being more of a think tank. I started MLC Consulting in 2022, and it does stand for my initials. It also stands for three things: mobilizing, listening, and connecting,
Mhm.
which is really at the heart of my work. Community engagement and diversity, equity, inclusion. I think that work really requires you to, bring the people together. That's the mobilizing part. Create a space for
Mhm.
listening and create a space where folks can connect with one another, whether it's through, their experiences or just one-on-one, oh, I didn't know you, or I've seen you in a room before and I didn't get a chance to say hello. My
Mhm.
work has encompassed all of that, and it's been really exciting because I've been able to do it, not just with government entities here. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. I
Mhm.
worked with the city of Madison. I've worked with other various entities around the city, and I had also had the pleasure working with private entities and nonprofits. So I've been able to work with a wide range of individuals, organizations, and at the heart of the work is how do we again mobilize people? How do we create a place where we're listening authentically and creating those connections that are long lasting? Um, Before that, I was working nationally, doing the work around community building with MIT, and even before that, in my time before working nationally, I was working here in Madison as a DEI consultant. So DEI has been at the very start of my work back in
Definitely.
2015. So I've been seeing it change and grow. And it's interesting, like, 10 years later, seeing 2025 where DEI is at. And I still think it's really an important conversation to be having, even more now, so
Yeah.
because so many folks are not understanding what it is, and it's totally understandable because even for me, as someone that's been working in the field, I could clearly
Mhm.
say has been changing since my first day working diversity, equity, inclusion for a corporation. So yeah, it's a little bit about me. If I'm not working communities, I like to do a lot of yoga, running. I play the ukulele. I got my little ukulele behind me. So
Oh, lovely.
try to stay,
Mhm.
have some fun.
That is so impressive, Matthias. So impressive. And of course, DEI has been at the core of your professional journey. So it's definitely an integral part of you. Um, so right now, since DEI is more than relevant ever, it has been, what exactly, because when in the corporate context we talk about diversity, inclusivity, or anything related to DEI, it's just on the paper. Sometimes it's just for the sake of it. So, what exactly does an inclusive space for dialogue actually look like in practice, and how you suggest leaders can begin to build one?
Oh, yes, and that's a great question. And I'm gonna lean into the L and the MLC, the listening. I think for leaders that are interested in doing intentional work, whether they're doing it themselves, with organizations or with community members, having an active listening skill is really crucial and will help you to get farther in these conversations than you actually think. And it's sometimes something that's overlooked, right? People say, yeah, 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 I hear you, but are you actually listening to what people are saying? Are you observing the movements, the emotions that are coming through? And how do we move beyond, engagement that looks like we're going to send a survey, we're going to send feedback, right? And actually change it so we're in front of people and listening and get those nuances that uh, oftentimes you don't get in reports and surveys, but you can truly get from people's experiences and hearing their voices. So I think now that we're moving into an era where it's really important for leaders to create these inclusive spaces. I think the number one tool that they can use is have a really active listening skill that allows them to really look beyond what's in front of them and dig deeper with the individuals that they're working with. Um, I think you can also get more technical, right? If you're going to
Yeah.
talk about like, what are you going to be talking about? I like ground rules personally, and this is something that I've been seeing not happening in a number of places where you have an intentional set of rules that are around for individuals to abide by and create a space where, everybody's equal, everybody is has a say in the table, can share comfortably, and can lean into that, the uncomfortableness. I think part of the difficulties that we're seeing now is that we're seeing folks not leaning into the uncomfortableness. And as a leader that wants to create that space, you have to lean in and engage with the discomfort, engage with, you know, what are people saying? How is that showing up for individuals? And try to find a way to move forward together. But you need also some ground rules to set the base for everybody so you're not screaming at each other and uh, causing chaos.
Mhm. Makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. And now we have talked about some of the steps to start with. In your experience, Matthias, consulting across different industries, what are some of the common missteps you have seen leaders making when they're trying to implement DEI initiatives?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mhm.
You know, I see individuals trying to use the same format, the same cookie cutter, let's cut it, for multiple spaces. Let's say whether it's the nonprofit realm where we work with a nonprofit, maybe it's a for-profit organization, or in our government, right? All those three look the same, and sorry, my apology. All the three are different, and you can't use the same format for each. You have to be very mindful of who your audience is and who's in the room.
Mm.
Um, I'll give you an example. I was sitting not long ago in a meeting, and we're talking about how to get individuals to help with some with a conflict resolution matter.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because the first step was, um, let's bring a consultant, let's bring a DI consultant to help do the work. But is that really the needed aspect that would fit best for the group?
Mhm.
I wasn't quite sure, so it was more of the how do we lean in and actually try to understand the problem and who's the audience um, that's being affected for for the problem that's at hand.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily the same answer always, right? You
Yeah.
want to adapt and move together. So when you're providing solutions, it's something that is tailored specific for the audience, so they understand and they can grasp and they can create a space so ideas can flow more naturally and be like, oh, this happened. I think as a facilitator, it's really important to be able to understand the nuances between the group that you're working with. And that's where
Mhm.
I come in as a facilitator, being able to create that space that encourages the participation for people
Mhm.
authentically. And the space that we're creating doesn't always mean the same, right? It could always be a group conversation, a circle, could be a
Mhm.
world style cafe that we're having, or sometimes even, we're going to fill out a form and then allow for space for reflections where folks can share
Yeah.
like what did emerge. All those are great ways to do that sort of inclusive environment for active listening.
Mhm.
And I would encourage folks to find what is going to be the most effective given the audience. And sometimes it's even asking the audience what has worked for you all in the past, or what strategy has worked in the past for the organization or group, and what hasn't worked, and having that conversation too, even before get diving into the how do we problem solve. So I've seen the leaders try to problem solve first, but sometimes
Mhm.
you need to take some step backs and realize, okay, what are going to be effective ways to address the problem, and there's conversations before that are even needed and afterwards too. So it's not like you can come in, do the conversation, and after the conversation all your problems are gonna be solved. Like there's active works that's needed throughout every step, and as a leader you should be listening to what are people saying, what's coming up, and how do you move together so you can be more productive.
Those are some really, really great steps, especially um, as you mentioned that, almost everywhere the standard template or formula or approach is used to address or create that awareness on DEI. But of course, it's not one size fits all. Every workplace is different. You know, people are different, and we have to first really understand in what way we can communicate to them and they can absorb that effectively. So that's, I think, it has to be a very mindful approach. And also,
Definitely very mindful.
yeah, yeah. And also, you have worked on the grassroots level as well as on the corporate sides of inclusion. So, how exactly, these two worlds inform each other? I mean, how do they interplay? Where do they often clash?
Yeah, I think they clash when, in the corporate level it's a clock in clock out sort of
Mhm.
world, which is totally fine. There is I'm here, very transactional. I'm gonna do the work, and
Mm.
I think that then talks more about a cultural shift. Like when you're in the workspace, how can you be more inclusive and lean into your colleagues rather than purely transactional? That's one piece that could be a conversation for a whole different topic. Um, in the nonprofit world, you have folks that are more passionate, are either leaning into the world and into the work, and there's also the works too, the folks that clock in and clock out. So I think they clash in the sense of does the organization have a clear purpose and ambition, and where does
Mhm.
it bring in individuals to feel like they can be part of that mission and vision together, or is it more like hands off? We're just here to get the work done, which is also totally fine. I think if you want to look into then how do you retain talent, how do you grow talent within your organization, and how do you grow yourself as an individual, um,
Mhm.
having those spaces where folks can be authentically themselves um, is really crucial. And oftentimes you have around in the corporate world where folks can be their most authentic self, and nonprofit world folks can, and you see a clash there with individuals. Or I can give this example: you're working for the city, you have to follow a very systemic structure, and oftentimes when you're working within a box, it doesn't allow you for that space for creativity, for um, new tools, for nuances to emerge. And the work that I do as a consultant is be able to expand that box a little bit more. You don't need to reshape it if the structure is there and folks really want to stay, but
Mhm.
how do we make it bigger, and how do we allow for, new tools, new ways of conversations, new ideas to emerge naturally, and really leaning into the individuals that are there. It's because oftentimes they have answers and they have ideas. They're just not provided the opportunity to really share and blossom. And um, part of a leader in creating those spaces is being able to create that space for folks to authentically express themselves and be able to ensure that all the voices are being heard equally, and amplify those great ideas that haven't been quite shared or explored yet. And then the next step is like, okay, how do we lean into exploring?
Mhm.
Um, so the world's really crashed in the sense of like, are people really created being invited to a space that allows them to be their authentic self, or sometimes they're just also just, I'm clocking in at 8 p.m., 8 a.m., my apologies, and
Mhm.
clocking out at 5 p.m. I need coffee this morning, it sounds like.
Uh, but you mentioned a very, very important point that it is necessary to make sure that all the voices are equally heard. Because often there are so many. Uh, I guess one of the biggest misconceptions of inclusivity or I know is okay, or maybe this particular community will be given more preference. I am not going to get my voice heard. It's kind of the entire opposite idea of inclusivity. So I think that's a really, really important point that you mentioned.
Yeah, and being inclusive is not hard, I'll say that. I think I often think around like, school settings, and you have the lunch table, right? And you see
Mm.
the one kid that is not sitting in the table.
Yeah.
In that example, like, you bring him in, you say, hey, come join us, come sit here. We can do that too in the workspace. We can say, hey, I see that you have a very valuable experience, or we haven't actually heard from you in the conversation. What are your thoughts? And I think again that goes back into the act of listening, and listening to also who's not speaking, right? That's a way of listening too that oftentimes gets overlooked. And as leaders, we also need to make sure that we're creating a space that all voices are being welcomed and have a say in the table. And it's not just, you're sitting here and you haven't contributed to a conversation. Like, invite people in, ask them, what are their thoughts, or provide different
Mm.
ways in which feedback can be provided. If it's not verbally, can they write it down, or type it into a computer in some sort of form, so folks can still provide the feedback. And that's part of being the inclusivity, is providing multiple ways for communications to come to you, and addressing it and listening to what's coming. We live in a world that there's a number of tools, so lean into the tools, utilize them, and ensure that folks can be heard while you're having these conversations, especially the difficult ones.
I think you know, schools can be such a good place to start with. I mean, in schools itself, I think because, of course, they are the future leaders there, the future leaders, the future working population who are there. I mean, I think from the grassroots level, from the beginning itself, I think this should be made aware about.
Right. Definitely important to start at the grassroots level and also talk to the grass tops. It's not
Hmm.
always the grassroots. There's three levels, the grass roots, the middle, and then the grass tops, and
Oh, okay.
creating spaces that allow for all three of those folks to be able to
Mhm.
come together. You got the executives, you got the folks that are beneath the executives, and the folks that work on day-to-day tasks, and everybody has an experience. Everybody has an authentic way to bring themselves to the table. And more and more, we are seeing the need for all backgrounds, all levels to be brought in and problem solved because it's not just the grass tops that can do all the solution. It's not all just the middle. It's actually everybody is part of it and everybody plays a role. And changing the conversation that way, I think, allows for people to feel more intentionally to lean in and again engage with that discomfort that you know something's not working. Is this the only experience, or how do we all come in together to have this conversation? With the DEI realm, it's oftentimes this think around like, how do we address racial disparities? And that could be a really good way to kind of engage everybody and see like, how do we bring in people that oftentimes don't get that opportunity to talk?
Exactly, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And on the before we wrap up, something on the flip side, some there's a growing sentiment that DEI fatigue is real, especially in fast-paced corporate settings. So, how do you keep leaders and teams engaged in this work long term?
Yeah, this is something I heard early on in my career, and I
Mhm.
really think it sticks true even today. And it's the quote that says it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mhm.
And I don't know, Sana, are you a runner or at all? um, because, and the only reason I ask is because, a marathon, you don't want to move really fast. You want to
Yeah,
pace yourself, right? You
exactly.
want to make
Exactly.
sure that the same energy you have at mile one is the same energy you can have at mile five, at mile
Yeah.
12, at mile 18, and at 26.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people feel like it's a sprint, like you have to move fast, you have to move really quickly. Um,
Mm.
and the flip side is that if you're moving really quickly, you're gonna miss a lot of things. You're not gonna listen. You're gonna overlook things, and you might end up causing more
Yeah.
harm. And it will bring you back to where you started. The marathon, the moving slow with intentionality, pacing yourself allows you to understand that you know one change takes time. It takes work, and if you're pacing yourself, you're much more capable of doing it than running really fast, running out of breath, and having to pick up again over and over and over. So I say to leaders, take your time, pace yourself, because it changes a marathon, and you gotta lean into it.
That's such an effective way of, you know, helping us understand that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So it has to be done intentionally and mindfully and gradually with consistency. Lovely, lovely. That's such a great answer, Matthias. So before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you, especially the leaders, the entrepreneurs, the business owners who wish to intentionally work on DEI and, also indirectly be more authentic and people centric if they wish to be, how can they connect with you?
Right now, I've been really active on LinkedIn, so feel free to send me a connection there. Happy to have a conversation and learn more around what's in your realm and just connect. I think that's the fun part about doing this work. It's the different people that you meet and the different experiences and be able to amplify and, what is going on in the ground right now so folks can know that there is more than one way to solve these problems. So yeah, reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to connect.
Lovely, lovely. I'll have all the links mentioned in the show notes. And Matthias, thank you so, so much for this conversation and for, being here and for sharing your wisdom so generously. And definitely your work reminds us that inclusion isn't just a trend. It isn't a trend. It is a commitment. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you to the listeners for taking the time. Um, really wonderful.
And to all of our listeners, if this conversation has sparked something in you, share it. Talk about it. Start that difficult dialogue at work or in your community. And until next time, keep blending bold leadership with intentional humanity. To connect with Matthias, you can refer to the show notes along with this episode. And until then, this is BizBlend, and I'm your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.